Well, I kind of feel bad for you all. After listening to that beautiful musical piece there, now you have to listen to me. One thing, though, that was not in my bio that's critical to know is that I'm also the president of Red Sox Nation Pentagon chapter. Okay? So in that role and responsibility, I feel compelled, especially after listening to that great talk on accountability, to acknowledge if there are any are there any Yankee fans here in the building? Oh, yeah. All right. So I do feel accountable, and I have brought extra chaplains for counseling after last night's ball game, although I don't know if it was a football game or a baseball game, according to that score. But anyway, it's great to be here. I feel very privileged and honored to be here, to be part of your gathering together. I was also reflecting on this gathering and what it is that we're here for, and I recalled a story, and the story was about a fella who began to get sick, and his wife took him to the doctor, and the doctor examined this man and then sent him back out to the waiting room and asked his wife to come in and privately to talk to her. And so he got her in the room there, and he said, "Look, your husband is extremely sick. His health is very fragile, and he needs to be taken care of. If not, he's going to die." And he said to her, "Look, when he gets up, make sure he gets a good breakfast, and make sure you send him off to work with a good lunch. And then while he's gone, it's imperative you get all the work done that needs to get done around the house, so he doesn't feel compelled to do anything like that. Make sure you get all the ironing done and get everything done that you possibly need. And when he gets home, again, give him a good meal. And if there's a ball game on, make sure that's on. And if he's in the mood for romance, make sure you're up for that." And all. So anyway, she left the doctor and grabbed her husband, got him in the car, driving home, says nothing. And finally the husband is like, "Tell me, what did the doctor tell you?" And she looked over at him and she said, "You're going to die." I like that. I don't know why I thought of that little story coming here talking to you guys. But truthfully, I thought of that story because it reveals a truth in the sense of what is it, why are we really here, right? I love to throw that why question out there. Why are we here? Why am I here? Why are you here? Why are we involved in this? It's a great question. The why question really gets into our purpose. But it also kind of allows us to connect ourselves with what we really believe, because that why question has to do with your faith. This presentation we just heard, or you heard prior to this session here, was really, I think, right in line, right on target with a lot of important things in the sense of accountability, in the sense of understanding what we're doing, right? And I'll tell you another story that's been before I get into the rest of my brief, but and I want you to keep that in mind as I go through this, that why question. Why are you here? And I'll tell you another story before I get going. When I was a new chaplain, I was less than a year as a chaplain, And as you heard in my bio, I was in the Army before as an artillery officer, so I was familiar with the military, with the Army. But as a chaplain, I was going through this new experience. And to be honest with you, it wasn't going well. It really wasn't. I mean, I wasn't impressed. I wasn't like, oh, this is really good. There was a lot of struggle going on. Again, I'm new as a chaplain. I'm trying to figure this out. How does this work, right? I mean, one day I'm a priest in a parish. You know, that's very clear ministry. And then the next day I know I'm in the Army as a chaplain. Completely different. And I'm trying to sort through all this in the sense of, what am I doing? And there was one chaplain that kind of changed all that for me. And this was not my immediate supervisor chaplain, as we say, but this was someone who was like the echelon above that. And anyway, I ran into this person. So again, they're not my direct, leader or supervisor, right? But I ran into this person, this chaplain, and they asked me something that no one had ever asked me before, as a new chaplain, assigned to a unit, trying to figure everything out. And this person said to me, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? And it's the first time someone ever really reached out and communicated to me that they cared about me, that they cared about what I was doing. They wanted to help me. All right? And that changed everything for me. It really did. It allowed me, it restored in me a sense of my why and purpose of what I was doing there in this institution. And that person, by the way, is someone that most of you know, this chaplain. And he's not here this morning, thank God. But it was Chaplain Vance Theodore, all right? And he was a couple echelons above me. He had no business, he had no reason to talk to me that way, or approach me and ask, how are you doing? What can I do for you to help you do your mission? I mean, that was amazing. It changed everything for me. But again, we go back to that sense of calling, or that sense of understanding why we're there. So, can I get that first? Oh, I gotta change this. Good. All right. So this is just a picture. Well, it's not before the picture. So this is George Marshall's quotation he gave during his reception of the Nobel Peace Prize. And it was his reflection on his understanding of soldiering, all right? And this is what he said was most important in his understanding of the mission that he was engaged in. And this is a person known, this is the Marshall Plan, right? This is the guy who Churchill referred to as kind of the Prince of Peace, or the leader of the world victory. But again, it's this understanding, right, of what's truly important, the why of people engaging in such a vicious, such a difficult, challenging, inhumane at times activity, right? And that is war. But I read this and it stuck with me from the day I read it until this very moment of why we need to be here, all right? Why, who is sustaining, who is engaged in caring for the souls of these soldiers or airmen or Marines or sailors, or where are you guys from? The Border Patrol. I mean, it's the same thing, right? We got people engaged in a very inhumane activity, if you will. And it's not so much the victory is not so much about the equipment or about the training, but it's something more, something deeper. It is that sustaining of the soul. And this is the work of the chaplain. This is the work of this organization. This endorsement. Why do we need this endorsement for this? To sustain the souls of these people. Next slide, please. Oh, that's me. All right, this is some of you may be familiar with this image of Valley Forge. So General Washington is there in the middle, kneeling. And I bring this picture up because it reminded me of another really vital truth, vital, fundamental reality of us being here. And it also reminded me of a story recently with General Gordon Sullivan. Anybody know General Gordon Sullivan? He was the Chief of Staff of the Army years ago, back in the 80s. He was also at times the acting Secretary of the Army. And today he is like the senior mentor for all the senior generals. He's like E.F. Hutton, you know that old commercial? So whenever, and he's 81 now, but when he comes to any of these senior leader conferences with a lot of the four-star generals, which I sometimes am privileged to be around just because they always are looking for, for a prayer, for whatever they're doing. But he is always the one that speaks last, right? Like after the Chief of Staff of the Army does his talk and whatever, they always like, oh, General Sullivan. And he always gets up, he always has something to say. But it's like, again, like the E.F. Hutton commercial. But anyway, he came to my office a couple months ago. He said, hey, Chaplain, I need your help on something. I'm in charge now of this new Army museum they're building outside of Fort Belvoir. And it's mostly a private endeavor, right? And they got some land right outside of Fort Belvoir, and they're building this museum. And Gordon Sullivan is kind of leading the effort on that. And he said to me, I was wondering about maybe we should have something in this museum which is supposed to represent the life of soldiers, U.S. soldiers, from the very beginning. He's like, I don't know what it is, but I think there should be something in there to kind of, include the spiritual something. This is General Gordon talking to me, right? So he's trying to articulate, and I'm like, you mean like a chapel? He's like, yeah, a chapel, that would be I'm like, that's why I'm here. But then he went on and he said, Chaplain, I just read a story the other day, and I never knew this before, but he's like, did you know that when George Washington agreed to lead the Army, and he went up to Boston, and as soon as he got up there, he saw everything that was going on and saw these militias that he was charged with turning into an army. And one of the first things he did at that point was to write back to Congress and ask for funds to hire clergy, to hire chaplains, right? Now I tell this story all the time, but General Sullivan is telling me this like I've never heard it before. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's amazing. So I like that story. I like that because, again, we talk about what's really important. Here's the first leader ever of our army, of our military, dare I say. But and he realizes, look, I'm going to ask these people. We're pulling them away from their families, their businesses, all that's important to them, and we're going to ask them to fight this world premier, fighting force in the world premier Navy, and this is an impossible mission. And what's the first thing he does? Hey, I need to bring in clergy to take care of these people, because that is what's most important. He knew that, right? That is an awesome story. And it's an awesome thing for all of us to keep in mind as we go forward, that from the very beginning, there was a realization of the need to care for these souls and the spirits of all those given themselves in this way. And again, how critical is it to have the chaplains? All right, next slide. This next slide is maybe a year ago, or it was less than a year ago, but there was a Medal of Honor ceremony. And in fact, we just had one last week, but this one was almost a year ago. And this was a medic from the Vietnam period. And it was over 40 years it took us to award this person the Medal of Honor, right? And you can look at that and say, oh, what a shame. It took us over 40 years to recognize this man for what he did. But in the end, I say, no, it was a blessing, because here's what happened. The Medal of Honor recipient, after the ceremony at the White House the next day, they get to the Pentagon and they're brought into the Hall of Heroes. And this is really the only time the Medal of Honor recipient gets to speak, right? So he is doing his talk at the end, and he's laying out what happened. And then he says, but what happened to me on that battlefield in Vietnam. Again, he's a medic, right? So he's a non-combatant. He doesn't have a weapon. And what he did was, he crawled out into a field of fire where soldiers were getting shot up, dragging off wounded who couldn't move themselves. He did that not once, twice, 3 times, but 10 times. Crawled out there, pulling off the soldiers that were wounded. But he said, this was not about my training. This was not about my bravery. He said, this was simply about my love for my brothers. And in the end of his speech, he ended it with, this is a story about my faith, my hope, and my love. This is the man that we are holding up as the model soldier, Medal of Honor recipient. And this is what he's saying. This is what's most important. Love. Love of my brothers. He said that's why he went out there. He's like, I wasn't being brave. I loved my brothers. I was just trying to help them. Right? So who works to help soldiers and sailors and airmen, right, in their life of love? Who helps to feed and nourish their understanding of what that means in their own lives as a military person? Chaplains. So when we were in the Pentagon auditorium when this guy was saying all this, and I was like ready to jump out of my seat, because usually you get in the typical, oh yeah, this was a great, brave act, and blah, blah, goes on and on. But I would say, if this person did not have 40 years to reflect on what had happened, he probably would not have said the truth. He probably would have attributed what happened to something else. But the truth is, he acted out of love. And that's what we have to recall and remember. What are we about? Why are we here? We're here to help these people in uniform, to realize that, to be able to exercise that, and to do everything we can that they need for them to be people of love. So next slide. This is the 4 chaplains. If you're an Army chaplain, I know you know this story, right? So, are you really a second lieutenant? No, not you. The guy with the, are you?
Yes, sir.
Oh, and you are too. Wow, I've not seen a second lieutenant.
Chaplain candidates.
Oh, candidates, okay. Oh, good. Do you guys know the story of the 4 chaplains? Do you want to come up and tell it? I'm kidding, I'm kidding. So the 4 chaplains, World War II. I should ask Chris Dine to come up, though, because I know you know it, right? Yes, sir. All right, that wasn't convincing. Chapman Colby.
Sir, I'll come up and tell it.
Okay.
I know you had the Dorchester Brigade.
All right. So World War II, there's a ship, troop transport, which was called the Dorchester, actually. It was not a Navy ship. Are the Navy people here? Yeah, it wasn't a Navy thing. It was there were no there were merchant marines.
That's why it sunk, sir.
Are you part of that? Are you part of that Yankee crowd? So much for accountability. All right, you need to go through that briefing again. So anyway, they get torpedoed, and there's 4 chaplains on board. There's a Protestant, 2 Protestant ministers, and a Jewish rabbi and a Catholic priest. That's right. And these guys, middle of the Atlantic, it's February, it's cold. The boats, what are those boats called? Lifeboats, thank you. I'm not familiar with all that Navy stuff. So the lifeboats, I guess, got frozen. So they couldn't lower them. They weren't available. And the only thing that was going to save anybody in that situation was their life jackets. So the chaplains, 4 chaplains at different places on the boat were distributing the life jackets to the soldiers, and each of them, unbeknownst to the other, reached back at one point, no more life jackets, but each of them took off their own life jacket and put it on the soldier in front of them, knowing full well that was going to cost them their life. To me, that is the ultimate image of who we are, of why we're there, of what we're called to. Quite simply, to be able to give our life jackets to those in front of us. That's our mission. That's what we're about. On the next slide, we have the emblem of the Chaplain Corps for God and Country. To me, we talk about purpose. We talk about understanding why. It's about calling. It's about believing that you have been called to this sacred duty and responsibility to care for these people. Calling is fundamental, but calling is also work. We are immersed in an environment that is almost countercultural to what we are there for, if you will. We need to work in order not to assimilate into that, but to maintain our own identity as one called. This is the challenge that we face day in and day out. It's also the reason that we gather. It's the reason that your endorser calls you together to be restored, to be reminded, to be renewed in that calling. This is a sacred responsibility to serve God and to serve country as chaplain, to care for those people, right? Who are given themselves and placing themselves in the most horrific environments that at times we can imagine. We are the ones sustaining those souls. We are the ones who are caring for a person's understanding of how to love one another. Calling, identity, legacy. These are the three things that we focus on the most, need to focus on the most in order to do this mission. I do this mission as a Catholic priest called into this awesome environment. You do your mission, called in your own faith tradition to operate and to live out that calling, to sustain the souls of all. It takes work. I am glad to be here. I was talking before about the challenges of all the responsibilities or all the invitations and all the requirements that come along. And for me, as Chief of Chaplains for the Army, this is where I need to be, with you, reminding and encouraging everyone, and not just the Army people, but encouraging everybody in your mission as chaplains to remember, to keep foremost in your mind that calling by God to this sacred duty for God and country. Thank you.